So I'm just going to give a presentation today on the aquatic connectivity study that we did on Tuscarora and Mill Creek's watersheds. For those of you on the call that don't know me, I'm Norris. I'm the project manager at Cacapon Institute. And before I get started, I just wanted to mention some of the participating agencies and organizations, Downstream Strategies, the North Atlantic Aquatic Connectivity Collaborative, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, West Virginia DEP, the Chesapeake Bay Program, and the CB Trust, Chesapeake Bay Trust. And before I get into it deep here, I want to go over a few definitions so we all are on the same page. Passability is a measure of the extent that a crossing allows the movement of aquatic animals. A higher score indicates more ability for crossings. A crossing site are locations where automotive or railroad traffic crossed over or fords a stream. Structures are the man-made devices that allow for a stream crossing. Structures include rock and concrete fords, bridges, culverts, or a combination. Culverts are the pipe-like structures that pass water through the crossing site itself. Culverts are constructed of corrugated steel, concrete. They can be round, oval, arched, and open bottom. Examples would be every stream crossing must have a structure. A stream crossing can include multiple structures. For example, a bridge with a culvert next to it, or multiple culverts in a row. Just an introduction, and Alana kind of started to touch on this, but Cacapon Institute conducted an assessment of the culverts and other stream crossing structures for fish passage and sediment transport on Tuscarora and Mill Creek. Those are sub-watersheds of Opequon in West Virginia. We used protocol developed by the North Atlantic Aquatic Connectivity Collaborative, and that's a mouthful, so I'm going to refer to that as NAACC from here on out. And this presentation provides the results of the work we conducted and subcontractor downstream strategies for the Chesapeake Bay Program Goal Implementation Team 2019 project. The study areas, as mentioned, were Tuscarora and Mill Creek of Opequon. These are in Berkeley County of West Virginia. Both of these are on the 303D list as impaired for biological criteria and fecal coliform bacteria, and have total maximum daily load studies and watershed-based plans in place to address these impairments. Tuscarora drains approximately 26 square miles and is 11.7 miles long. Karst topography results in dry sections. We found 2 dams bar passage of aquatic organisms. Mill Creek drains approximately 29.8 square miles, the main stem being 14.5 miles long. 2 dams in this watershed create severe barriers for aquatic passage. The process for this study, prior to doing field work, we completed, CI staff and Alana, we completed online training through NAACC, the non-tidal stream protocol training. Followed by that, we completed non-tidal stream shadowing training administered by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife staff and NAACC coordinators. The shadowing training consisted of 2 days where we surveyed 20 sites to get field experience prior to actual field work. Once we got back, we conducted a pre-survey. We utilized 8 interns in the panhandle here, 4 CI staffers and Alana. We completed a pre-survey of all NAACC sites in ArcGIS collector. At that point, we contacted private landowners with crossings to gain permissions to survey. This was done through a mailing, and I'll talk about this more towards the end. At that point, we completed field surveys. 2 trained surveyors were on location for each survey completed. All surveys were completed using NAACC non-tidal protocol. We entered all data into NAACC's database, interpreted, and reported on results. Before I get into the results, I wanted everyone to see the field data sheets we utilized. These were developed by NAACC, and they're pretty extensive. The data form on the left, you can see for each crossing, we fill out crossing data, which includes lat long, things like the constriction of the stream, the crossing condition itself, the alignment of the stream to the crossing, whether or not there's a tailwater scour pool, road fill height, which directly correlates with the cost to replace a crossing. And then for each structure, we do a multitude of measurements on the inlet, outlet, and going to the second picture here, you can see the structure shapes and what we measure in terms of dimension for each structure. Round culvert, pipe, arch, elliptical, open bottom, arch, bridge, culvert, box culvert, and there's 3 different kinds of bridges: bridge with slopes, bridge with abutment, and bridge with abutment and side slopes. Additional conditions that we check for at each site when surveying is the substrate through the structure, if there's any internal structures, physical barriers, and the water depth and speed compared to the stream channel itself. Just to give you an idea again of what we're doing in the field for each individual survey. And then the results here, we'll start to get into the results. Initially, when we pulled the data, the GIS data off NAACC's website, we found 166 stream crossings. Of those 166, again, that pre-survey helped out. We only actually found 142 of the stream crossings. We were able to survey 109 stream crossings. Within those 109 stream crossings, we found 151 structures, 81 being single structures, 19 being double structures, 4 being triple structures, and 5 quadruple structures. So after we go out in the field, do the survey, fill out the data sheet, we go back on the NAACC website, input all the data algorithm that uses the data to determine what kind of barrier it is off of an aquatic passability score. And you can see all the possibilities here: no barrier, insignificant, minor, moderate, significant, severe, or no score. And you can see out of the 109 surveys that we did, 32 had no barrier and 42 were insignificant. I think this is a big takeaway. Majority of the sites that we surveyed had either an insignificant or no barrier. Another takeaway is that 8 of the sites, 8%, were severe. These would be locations to look at if we ever find funding to replace. You'll also note that 2 of the sites had no score. What that means is an example of no score would be a site that we were able to survey the inlet but not the outlet. So there wasn't enough data to utilize the algorithm to come up with an aquatic passability score. And then to give you examples of what these are, again, the aquatic passability score, the higher the score, the higher the passability. A few things to note. I want to give you all pictures of what each one means: no barrier, insignificant, moderate, etc. But before I get into that, a few things to note. The NAACC Aquatic Passability Scoring System describes the following features as core elements for a stream crossing structure to have no impact on movement of aquatic life. The inlet and outlet of the structure are at stream grade. No drop to stream surface at the outlet. Water depth at inlet and outlet at least 0.3 feet at typical low flow. The substrate on bottom of structure is present for the full length of the structure, and the structure contains no physical barriers. So starting with the best case scenario in the top right picture here, this is an example of a no barrier structure. This would be an APS score of 0.99 or greater. As you can see, there's substrate completely through. The typical low flow stream channel is much narrower than the crossing itself. You can see bank full within this picture. This is an example of no barrier. Going below that, an example of insignificant. Again, you can see substrate going all the way through. It's at stream grade. The stream channel itself is just a a little closer to the width of the structure itself. And now to go on to some other examples, starting the top left, this would be an example of minor. This is one of the triple structures that we surveyed. You can see that this is a picture of the outlet, and you can see that there's an outlet drop to stream grade at the center culvert, and somewhat of one on the left culvert. The box culvert on the right, although the picture doesn't really show it, is at stream grade and there is water there. So that's a minor barrier. Moving to the right, a moderate. This is a double culvert, and both have an outlet drop to stream grade. You can't see any substrate in either one of the culverts. You can really only see the left one in the picture. So this is an example of moderate. Bottom left, we have an example of significant. This is a ford on Mill Creek that we surveyed, and you can see majority of the structure has an outlet drop to stream grade, which makes passability quite hard for most fish species. Also, the picture doesn't really show, but there was no substrate on the ford whatsoever, and the water depth on the ford was much less than 0.3 feet. Moving to the right, this is a great example of a severe barrier. This is the big ford on Mill Creek, and that outlet drop that we're seeing is 5.0 feet. So that doesn't really need much explaining. That's a significant barrier to aquatic passage. I wanted to give everybody a map view of what this looks like, all 109 surveys we did. So we'll look at a map of Tuscarora, and then we'll look at a map of Mill Creek. First, with the map of Tuscarora, you can see, I think, a great takeaway. Dark green means no barrier, light green means insignificant barrier. A nice takeaway of this is that we're seeing a lot of green. So a lot of our culverts within Tuscarora Creek watershed are in good conditions in terms of aquatic passability. One thing to note, you can see DS site number 1 in center screen. That's a severe barrier. So it only takes one severe barrier to bar passage to huge sections of a stream. So right dead center almost in Tuscarora Creek, excuse me, we have a severe barrier. So passage above is limited to above, passage below is limited to below. So that's something to note. DS sites mean downstream strategy sites. After we completed all of our surveys, downstream strategies took some of the severe barrier sites and made recommendations for replacements. And I'll go over a few of those here in a couple slides. So now let's look at Mill Creek. Mill Creek is about the same thing. I think a positive takeaway for West Virginia in this watershed is, again, we're seeing a lot of no barrier and insignificant barriers along Mill Creek, Torreytown Run, and Sylvan Run. Few severe barriers within the main stem of Mill Creek, and multiple moderate, significant, and severe barriers in the headwaters. But all in all, we're still seeing a lot of green, which I think is a positive takeaway from this study. And now let's get into downstream strategies. They assessed 7 sites for us that were severe barriers or significant barriers. Actually, the one on the right is moderate too, but that ford pops up again, the private ford off Route 28. Downstream strategies suggested that the ford could be removed and replaced with hardened crossing, bank-full width bridge, or bottomless box arch culvert. Banks and channel will require stabilization because the outlet drop is 5 feet. Doing so will reduce any further degradation. And here's the double culvert on Guthrie Drive. The double culvert is likely causing the stream to widen and introducing erosion. Upstream and downstream, the end of the scour pool could be armored and raised, but a bottomless culvert or bank-full width bridge would likely be the best BMP. You'll find that throughout when we talk about aquatic connectivity and aquatic passage, that an open bottom bridge or a bottomless culvert is the ideal structure for aquatic passage. Now, we talked about sediment in this slide and a few others. Since the NAACC assessment does not address sedimentation directly, we use the scour pool information as a proxy for sites with likely erosion issues. The larger the scour pool, we believe, the more sediment the site produces. It would appear from this information that stream crossings in the study watersheds were not generally a source of significant sedimentation in the study streams. So of the 109, we only found 8 large scour pools. Something to the method for determining a scour pool I think is interesting. A small scour pool is between 1 and 2 times the length, width, or depth of a reference pool within that section of stream. And a large scour pool is more than twice the length, width, or depth of a reference pool in that section of stream. Now, no scour pool, there's no difference in reference pools within that section of stream. So a large scour pool, it's pretty evident when you come to a site that has a large scour pool.
Hey, Zach.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Or do you want to wait till the end? Okay.
No, this is fine.
Yeah, so in the case of sediment, particularly with the culverts, wouldn't the material drop out above the culvert instead of below it because that's where the water slows down? And is that what you looked at, or did you look downstream of the?
We decided as a group that the tailwater scour pool may show signs of sediment. And again, it's just the pushing. The tailwater scour pool is an indication that that culvert is pushing way too much water. So, but I see what you're saying, that looking upstream at sediment deposits before a constriction culvert could be a viable way of doing it as well.
Or a different way, yeah. Okay, looking at something different. Okay, thanks.
A few interesting finds along the way. You know, we did 109 surveys and we did find some interesting stuff. And I wanted to point out some. In Mill Creek headwaters, the culvert inlet, in this case, collapsed. The left picture, this picture is taken looking directly into the pipe. You can't see light at the end of the culvert. It's completely collapsed on the inside. It's rolled at the inlet that you can see. And it's perched also. So there is stream actually running through those rocks underneath the culvert. This was a pretty interesting find. Another interesting find on Mill Creek was a private land culvert we found in a field. Again, the stream's really running underneath this whole system. It's not running through these tires. It's just interesting that logs were used on the right side of the head wall, some rocks on the left side of the head wall, tires for the culvert itself with plywood and concrete there. This is just a poor example of a crossing. And then I also provided a picture of one of the CSX bridges on Mill Creek. In all cases, all the CSX sites were really good crossings for passability. I think they all scored very high, very wide, very robust structures. Just a few interesting finds I wanted to show. And then discussion in terms of passability. Only 2 structure types, as I mentioned, fit the ideal no barrier: bridges and bottomless culverts. Other structures lose points because they have less ideal characteristics. The APS is a representation of passability. Understanding the actual impact of these stream crossings will require more study, and I quoted NAACC here from 2015. The concept of aquatic passability is complicated and includes variations in the swimming and leaping abilities of individuals within a species, variability in passage requirements for a broad diversity of species, and the timing of passability for what proportion of the year is the structure passable. This is just something to note. I guess as more research gets done on this, we may improve methods or find new methods. We'll see. Lessons learned by us. this was a long process for us, and we learned quite a few things, and hopefully some of these lessons can be utilized by people that do this kind of work in the future. The informal pre-survey of the existence and condition of stream crossings from the downloaded NAACC data will rapidly eliminate dubious data. We could not find 12% of total crossings right off the get-go. This saved us significant time when going out to do field work from looking for crossings. Pre-survey also allows for participation of untrained participants, volunteers, or local watershed managers. We also found that sending an introductory letter to all property owners near public crossings to introduce CI and NAACC proved valuable. There were many instances when we were out doing surveys in the field that property owners came out, talked to us. In a few instances, we were able to get permission to access private culverts. I think people just appreciated knowing that we were coming out prior to us showing up. We contacted private landowners through a mailing to request permission to survey. In this, we included a self-addressed stamped return postcard and information to reply by phone or email. We also included an Opequon Creek canoe guide by way of appreciation. This helped us, and I'll show you, I made a slide here of what we did for this. But this helped us in a couple ways. It made it clear to us, those that replied and said we could not access the private property, it made it clear that we weren't going to be able to survey that. So we didn't spend time looking for other avenues to do so. We did get multiple replies where people just said, yeah, come on out anytime you want, or here's my number, give us a shout when you're coming out. But this proved valuable. And again, here's a picture of the postcard on the right, and we we return addressed this and stamped everyone that we sent out. And we sent a nice letter just letting people know what we're doing with it. This is a great thing to do for future studies like this. Again, we got a number of postcards back. So ongoing work. We were able to complete the study on Tuscarora Mill Creek pretty quickly, and we had some money left over. So we were able to utilize some of that money and do more surveys. We completed and entered many surveys on Dillon's, Waits, and Bloomery Run in the Cacapon River watershed. All those tributaries are known brook trout habitat. We also completed surveys on Warm Springs Run main stem. That runs through Berkeley Springs and down the 522 corridor. That stream is known for flooding and has planned highway bypass installation, which will inevitably increase impervious surface area. So it was nice that we were able to complete the work pretty quickly and then actually move on to a few other watersheds and get some surveys on the website. Moving forward, multiple. We had 2 watershed groups express interest in participating and completing surveys. We feel a training for these groups could prove valuable. With local ties, watershed groups have an advantage to gaining permissions for surveys on private land. Another thing to mention, moving forward, I was recently elevated to an L2 coordinator for the NAACC, which at this point allows me to facilitate trainings for NAACC. So the idea of doing a training for watershed groups or interested parties to get more of this work done in West Virginia is actually a viable option at this point. And then I'll end it here with just a picture. Two weeks ago, I was invited down, and I went down to Southern Virginia. I was invited down by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to help train Virginia's inland fisheries biologists. And this is just 2 pictures from our training last week. A great group of people, and we actually had good weather, so it was a nice day out there. Thanks everyone for listening to me. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has or comments.